Today I will talk about percentage processor time versus percentage processor time. And it's difficult to even pronounce this together, and I can understand the confusion sometimes these perfmon objects and counters cause. And this video is of course inspired by a question that came up in one of the forums recently. So performance monitor, as many of you might know, is a tool that comes with Windows, which will allow you to check on SQL Server and Windows and a lot of other applications that are running on Windows, check their performance, which is monitor how well they are behaving when they're running. So there are two objects, processor and process, and both of these objects have a counter called processor time, but they behave differently. When I say behave differently, specifically on a multi-proc system, they show different numbers, and you need to understand what processor time would mean in relation to the processor, overall number of processors that you have, and what will processor time mean in relation to the exact process. And for this video, our process is SQL Server. So instead of talking about them conceptually, let me show this and try to explain this to you with a demo. So as usual, no more slides, and we will jump right into action. So the performance monitor is already open in front of me, and in background you can see SQL Server Management Studio. I have removed all the counters from this performance monitor window pane, and I will click on the plus sign now to add the two counters that we talked about, and it just takes a bit of time to load all the counters. So you can see now the processor and the process, both the counter objects are there, and from processor I'll click on the down arrow and scroll down and add the processor time, and I'm going to add it for all the CPUs. So you could see that I have 8 CPUs right now in this VM, so 0 to 7. So let's take the processor time for all of them total and then add. And then I'll scroll up a bit and go to the process object here and click on the down arrow, and I will again take the processor time. And now when I take the processor time for the process, I need to choose the process, and I'm going to choose SQL Server. So on my keyboard, I'll just quickly type SQL, and all the processes that begin with SQL are here, and the one that we want is SQL Server. This is the one, so that's the exe, and then I will select this and click on add here and click on OK. And now you can see the two processes, the two counters out here, and you can see the scale as well. It's 1, which is the default scale for both the counters, but then I will have to change the scale for the first one, the processor time for SQL Server, and I will explain that to you in a moment. And when I double click on this, let me just go and change the scale back to 0.1. That will be enough. And now, first things first, if we look at the SQL Server processor time, you can see that maximum is about 84 out there. So watch for this space, it's about 84 and percentage. And for the processor time overall, you can see maximum is about 12%. Now, obviously, if you ask anyone about monitoring the CPU time, Task Manager is one of the most popular tools to look into the processor time. So if I go into the Task Manager, if I launch it, and if we click on the CPU tab there, and in a moment you will see SQL Server will pop up. So let me go and run some workload. Let me just add one user. And now when I go to the Task Manager and scroll up, we will see SQL Server coming on top here in a moment. There you go. So you can see SQL Server Windows NT 64-bit. Now SQL Server consumes, as you can see, about 13%, and the overall CPU consumption is 18%. You can watch that even in the graph here, but let's go back and look at our numbers. Okay, so this is the number that I was talking about. So 18, 22 now, and then SQL Server is using 14%. Let's go back to the perfmon and let's understand the difference. So processor time, you can see maximum is 35, but currently the processor time for the for the processor object is sitting nicely at about 20%. But if you look at the processor time for the SQL Server process, the maximum is about at 100. Now here is the difference. What does 100% here mean for the processor for the SQL Server process? Let's add a few more users. I'm adding 4 more users to get this concept really clear. Now let's go back and look at the performance counter. Now that's the reason. Now you can understand why I changed the scale. So if you look at the processor time for the red one for SQL Server process, you can see maximum has gone up to 478. Now this is what I mean. In a multi-proc system, you kind of have 100% for each proc. So if you have 8 procs, this can go up to a maximum of 800. Now 800 would be the relative, and you will have to find out the relative of what 800 would mean as 100% of the overall CPU consumption. So if I look at the processor time for the processor itself, you can see about 80%. So 80% is the total utilization. What does the task manager say? Well, the task manager also says that approximately 80% is the, so look at watch here. So this is the one that I'm talking about. 80% is the total utilization of the CPU, but how much is SQL Server utilizing? About, that's about 57 to 58%. And let's go back to the perf and you can see 57 to 58%. So, and here it says 487. Now let's do some mathematics. So I will launch the calculator, and what I want to do is I can see 487. Let's take 487 of 800. What's the 100% in relative terms into 100? Okay, and you get about 60%. And if we go and look into the task manager, are we sitting at 60%? Yes, more or less. This is the calculation that we need to do. So, and I looked at maximum. That's why I get a difference of a few percentages here, because I'm not supposed to look at the maximum. I need to look at the current number. So if I go and change this to the report, and then for the process, I can see 434, 449, and let's go and do some mathematics here again. So let's take 435 by 800. 800 is the max what we can go up to, because there are 8 processors into 100, and this is where we are, 54%. So that sits nicely with where we are in terms of the processor utilization. So this is what I really mean by the processor utilization when you look at the processor time of the processor object versus the processor time of the process object. Hope this demo was useful to you. Well, then thank you very much for your time for watching this video. I hope to meet you again soon in another video.